devastating season-ending playoff loss.
Jalen Carter refused to let Philadelphia Eagles' self-inflicted wounds end their season.
We have been waiting 12 long years for another opportunity like the one Notre Dame has today.
Ohio State's mission throughout the playoffs has been to leave no doubt, and that's exactly what needs to happen tonight.
Kentucky basketball took it down to the wire against the Alabama Crimson Tide.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Buffalo Bills are one win away from going to the Super Bowl.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
Happy Victory Monday to you. The Buffalo Bills defeated the Baltimore Ravens 27-25 and are headed to the AFC Championship game. Folks, that was an absolute dogfight. We know Baltimore is a tough matchup for Buffalo, and they sure were in this game. But at the end of the day, the Ravens were the team that made crippling mistakes and came up short. I said it all week. Games are lost more than they are won. The 4 teams that won in the divisional round and advanced to the conference championship games turned it over 0 times. The teams that lost combined for 10 turnovers. The Buffalo Bills defense, the big play defense that it has been all year, comes away with 3 monumental takeaways. The offense took care of the ball, and now the Buffalo Bills are 1 win away from going to the Super Bowl. All right. Hopefully you've caught your breath. I'll tell you what, that was a game that was emotionally draining. That was a week that was emotionally draining. The anxiety, the game finally gets there. You watch 3 other playoff games. You're waiting all day for Sunday night, as the saying goes. And then you feel like this Bills team is in such a good place coming out of the half up 21-10. You feel it slipping away there in the second half. Baltimore has a chance to tie it up. They score. They need a 2-point conversion. Mark Andrews drops the ball. Rasul Douglas recovers an onside kick. 1 first down. Josh Allen kneels it out. And we get ready for an AFC Championship game. But first, let's react to this game. I want to have a traditional post-game reaction podcast. We'll do things I liked. We'll do things I didn't like, recap my predictions, and talk a little bit about this AFC Championship game. In terms of things I liked, I think we got to start with the defense. And I really just like how they adapted. The first drive of this game was everything you kind of feared it would be. Now, you were happy that the Bills kind of sold out. They stopped the run early, but they were super careful with the pass rush. You're playing zone coverage. All the eyes are on Lamar Jackson. He hit some throws. Those zones were getting soft. They score a touchdown. And then they kind of settled in a little bit. Bills started to be a little bit more aggressive with their front. They applied some 5-man pressures, played a little man coverage, introduced a little chaos to the Baltimore Ravens offense, and learned that you couldn't really play that game on your heels. And adapted pretty well up until maybe the end there. I thought the Bills overall did a pretty decent job defending the run. That was the big narrative all week long. Can the Bills stop the run or defend it or give themselves a chance? Were the Ravens just going to give the ball to Derrick Henry 35 times and run it down the Bills' throat? Well, the Bills did a decent job of defending the run, and I think that's probably as good as you can hope for. Nobody was stopping this rushing offense. The Bills did a decent job. Lamar Jackson 6 carries for 39 yards. Derrick Henry, 16 for 84. You can live with that. They go 176 rushing yards. Baltimore's been over 220 on the ground in each of their last 4 games. Justice Hill was the hardest guy the Bills had to defend back there. And so you gave up a little production, but it wasn't a snatch your soul type game that a lot of people feared it could be. And look, you knew that this Baltimore offense was going to have some production. They were going to move the ball. They were going to make some plays. This is a tough matchup for Buffalo on defense. But they were able to move the ball, but the Bills defense did the thing that they did all season long, and they made a bunch of game-changing plays in high-leverage moments. The first one was the Taylor Rapp interception. It's a horrible throw by Lamar Jackson. That's all that was. Horrible throw. Hung it out there. Taylor Rapp, easy catch. Then, Damar Hamlin with a sack. Lamar fumbles. Von Miller with a big return. Baltimore was moving it, right? They were kind of getting close to the red zone. Game-changing play by Damar Hamlin. Huge recovery by Von Miller. Set up a short field and a touchdown for the Bills. And then Terrell Bernard. I mean, Mark Andrews catches that ball wide open in the middle of the field. And Terrell Bernard made a very aggressive choice to punch that ball out, man. He just threw a right hook. He threw a right hook. Ball comes out. He wasn't going to tackle him. He said, I'm either going to punch this ball out or you're going to get a even bigger chunk of yards. Made a big play, game-changing play. Then you wind up stopping, and I'll use air quotes, stopping 2 2-point conversions. You did stop the first one. Second one, I mean, you're out leveraged. They throw the ball right to Mark Andrews. The dude's got to make the play. He didn't make it. I don't feel sorry for him. I mean, the Bills have been on the other side of that play so many times, right? Where you're the team that makes a crippling mistake. Make the play. You couldn't make the play. But the Bills did find some negative plays on defense. Damar Hamlin with a couple tackles for loss, including that sack. Greg Rousseau, tackle for loss and a sack. Dorian Williams with a tackle for loss. And both of those tackles for loss came up in that second quarter red zone goal line drive. And Oliver with a tackle for loss. He felt like he was pretty active in this game. But I want to go back to that. When the Bills bowed up on defense in the red zone there in the second quarter, before the Bills scored right ahead of the half, I mean, Baltimore got it down there, 1st and goal from the 2. Whatever receiver it was, I think Bateman gets behind Damar Hamlin, who's the middle of the field defender. It probably should have been an interception, but they get behind him. The one thing you can't do there is a deep middle defender. 1st and goal from the 2. Baltimore settles for a 26-yard field goal from the 8. And on that series, you had the Rousseau sack, and then you had the, I guess, Dorian Williams / Matt Milano tackle for loss. That goal line stand and the 2 takeaways that this defense had in the first half put the Bills in a really good spot going into halftime. And I'll say this, look, you've heard throughout the course of the week and even after the game, Bills coaches and players talking about some of the narratives out there about, you know, look, are they too small? Do they have enough talent on defense, et cetera, et cetera? And I like that they internalized that and made it motivating. I think a lot of that is fair for people to discuss and bring up. But great job just using that as motivation and fuel to go out there and have the type of game that they did, which was good enough to win, which included some big-time tackles for loss, some big-time takeaways, a huge goal line stand. So, again, I don't think a lot of that stuff wasn't true. I thought a lot of those were very fair questions. But as I've said a million times, like, the best teams can find ways to put a chip on their shoulder, find things to be motivating factors. And I think the Bills defense found the right stuff and certainly were a big reason why the Bills won this game. And I think the Bills needed every one of those things. The 3 takeaways, the negative plays, The Mark Andrews drop, they needed every bit of it to get out of there with a win, and they got out of there with a win.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add a little bit of juice to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Devastating season-ending playoff loss.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
First full day, I guess, of the Ravens offseason, and it does not feel good to be here. Ravens lose 27-25 to the Bills in the divisional round in pretty devastating fashion, I would say. Seemed like they got off to a fast start, and then they were out of it, and then they were back in it, and then, of course, they were out of it at the end. And we're going to talk about everything here today. Lamar Jackson, after the game, he sounded off and also got real on Mark Andrews. We'll get into all of that in the first part of the show, and then we'll also dive into some of the other comments Ravens players had to say. We'll talk about if the Ravens will ever get over the hump in the second part of the show and kind of the narrative surrounding Lamar Jackson. And this is coming out on Monday morning, so I haven't even heard any of the national media points on it yet, but we will talk about what we've heard so far on social media. And finally, we'll talk about what went wrong with the Bills, talk a little offseason, although not too much offseason. We'll get into that as the week and obviously the weeks go on here on the show. I do want to start with this, though, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the final part of the show. It's a tough way to end the year. You know, I'm devastated. I'm sure everyone listening is devastated. Well, maybe if you're a Bills fan or someone else who's not a Ravens fan listening, maybe you're not. But all Baltimore is devastated right now. But this was a really fun season for me in particular, and I hope a lot of other people had a lot of fun this year watching this Ravens team. Obviously, doesn't really mean a lot when they don't go far and don't make to the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl, but just for me personally, growing this show professionally and just personally for the show as well, I hit a lot of goals this year. That doesn't happen without the support of everybody in audio form and in video form and all over the place. So thank you for all that support. And again, we're not going anywhere here on Locked On Ravens. We're 5 days a week, even in the off season. So be sure to join that ride or continue on that journey with me as we talk Ravens and try to figure out how this team can get over the hump. But Lamar Jackson, he sounded off after the game, and obviously Lamar was upset. He was mad. He was angry, and you wouldn't guess anything other than that because Lamar is a competitor. He wants to win, and, you know, that's just who Lamar is. And so, first of all, he was asked a question about Mark Andrews, and he said, of course, we're a team in the first half. I had 2 costly turnovers, me not holding the safety, me just knowing the coverage and knowing it was man coverage. I threw a BS interception. It was 7-7 at the time. I believe they scored after that. We battled back, fumbled a snap, trying to make something happen. It was like an RPO play, so I couldn't really throw the ball to Likely because the offensive line was down the field. So I tried to make something happen, tried to squeeze the ball, it slipped out of my hand. They picked it up, got some yards, and I think that led to points for them. So it's a team effort out there. He said, Mark's been busting his behind. He's been making plays on the field for us. We came up short, and like I've been saying all season, here's what Lamar really sounded off right here. Every time we're in situations like this, turnovers play a factor, penalties play a factor, and then he, got really explicit with the language, and I think that just showed the passion Lamar had here. He said, it's 9 turnovers. We can't have that stuff, although this is a family-friendly show. So I'm substituting stuff for the expletive word there. We can't have that stuff. That's why we lost the game. Hold on to the effing ball. I'm sorry for my language. That stuff is annoying. I'm tired of this stuff. I mean, Lamar, he was sounding off. And look, this is the competitor in Lamar. This is Lamar feeling like he let the team down and him being frustrated with the fact that he has been here before. And he talked about that, where he said that he's tired of coming up short, and it's frustrating for him and how he has been in this situation and how he and this team has not been able to go there. He talked about how he and Josh had an awesome moment after the game, and, he said, I have to get over this because we're right there. I'm tired of being right there. We need to punch it in. We need to punch in that ticket. We have to get right in the offseason. This is going to be the narrative surrounding the Ravens and Lamar. Now, I don't think Lamar deserves all the blame for this game. I want to say that. There were two really costly turnovers that he had early. We're going to acknowledge that. We're going to say that happened. We can't just throw that away. Lamar was a reason why the Ravens lost this game. But I thought that he played a much cleaner second half. I thought that he, on that final drive, was pretty magnificent. And again, like if the turnovers don't happen in the first half, okay, maybe we're talking about a different ballgame. There are a lot of things that could have gone different. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Lamar was the only reason they lost that game. Mark Andrews was a big reason they lost that game. The coaching, Todd Monken, not Harbaugh in particular, but Todd Monken and the play calling, I thought, was not up to standard in this one. But Lamar is somebody that he takes a lot of pride in being able to lead his team, and he is a perfectionist, right? It feels that way. So whenever he makes those mistakes, obviously he does own up to it, which I think is really big of him. And I think that, look, he kind of took his licks in the press conference, right? You know, he admitted to his mistakes. He answered all the questions, I thought, admirably. He, you know, took ownership. And you see some quarterbacks do that and some quarterbacks don't do that. And, you know, I give Lamar a lot of credit. He said the takeaways from the season and the game was protect the ball. Like I said, we're driving the ball smoothly all game. I don't think we punted tonight. It was the 3 turnovers that got us off the field. So if you protect the ball, we're not even having these conversations, and you guys aren't even having those types of questions for me. You have to do a better job protecting the ball. Then we'll be on the right track. And this is a fact. The reason the Ravens lost this game, if you've been with me on Locked On Ravens every day, I talked about this. When the Ravens play their game and don't get in their own way, they can win the Super Bowl. They're the best team in the league, it feels like. But when they do, it's just crippling mistake after crippling mistake. And the Ravens didn't lose any games this season in blowout fashion. It always felt like either the Ravens were blowing people out, or they were winning close games, or they were losing close games that they had chances to win in, but they just couldn't get out of their own way. And the Ravens in this game, just for context a little bit, they outgained the Bills by almost 150 total yards. They had more rushing yards than the Bills. They had more passing yards than the Bills. They averaged more yards per pass. They averaged more yards per play. They averaged more yards per carry. They went 7 of 10 on third down. They went 1 of 1 on fourth down. They had 3 more first downs than the Bills. And then you look at the turnover category, and it's the loudest thing on the box score stat sheet. 3-0. The Ravens made the mistakes and the Bills didn't. And that was the difference. It's a 2-point loss. And that's where the mistakes come in. It's not just the turnovers. I am talking overall mistakes. Obviously, the Andrews drop on the 2-point conversion, which we will dive into. The 2-point call the first time, I thought, was a really bad call from Todd Monken. I don't really disagree with the second call. It worked. I mean, Rashad Bateman said a nice, it was a rub route essentially, and Mark was able to get open and to throw. There's been a lot of controversy on the throw. I don't think it was a bad throw. I mean, was it a tad low? I don't even think so. I thought it was a fine throw. I just don't think Mark was able to secure it. I see a lot of people blaming Lamar for the throw, and I'm like, he hit him in the chest, stomach area. I don't really know what else you want from Lamar in that situation. That is on Mark, in my opinion. But Lamar also talked a little bit about Mark after the first question. He was asked if he talked to Mark after the game. He said, yes, I talked to Mark on the sideline, but I'm just as hurt as Mark. It's not his fault. All of us played a factor in the game. It's a team effort. We're not going to put that on Mark because he's been battling all season. He's been doing all the great things he's been doing all season. It doesn't always go our way. We want it to, but at the moment in time, it's not going our way. We need to figure it out. And that was kind of the message from the entire team. John Harbaugh, Isaiah Likely, everybody was talking about how they're not going to put it on Mark. And Mark, put his heart out there on the line for the team this season and recovered from, this is me talking here. He recovered from a very rough early season stretch and played great football up until this game. He was a huge reason the Ravens lost. There are going to be conversations about his future, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit in the second part of the show here. But it is not all on Mark, right? You can say, is Mark the most to blame, or is Lamar the most to blame, or is Monken the most to blame, or is whatever is the most. There are differing opinions on that, but this is a team game, like Lamar said, like Harbaugh said, and it's difficult because trying to process this loss, it'd be easier if it wasn't the same old Ravens. If you caught the live show after the game and there were a lot more raw emotions in that from me, obviously this is coming out a couple hours after the game. Well, more like 8 hours after the game ended. It's taken a little time for me to process, but we're getting there, right? And again, the emotions are super high for everybody here, but the Ravens, this is their reputation. They're a good regular season team, and they falter in the playoffs when it matters. That has been the John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson pairing narrative, and they can't do anything about that until a year from now. The Ravens could go 17-0 during the regular season, and not a soul would care. Not a soul. They could be the most dominant regular season team ever, and no one would care because the narrative, and it's not wrong. They have not performed up to expectation. This to me was Lamar's, when everybody's talking about, Lamar can't perform in the playoffs, this, that, and the other. And that's a whole other loaded conversation, which I think Lamar has gotten overly criticized for that. Lamar had the 2 bad turnovers, right? We're not going to excuse him for that. But I think he recovered. And, it's difficult because it's a full 60 minutes. You're not just going to throw away the turnovers and say they didn't happen, as we talked about earlier. But this Ravens team has a lot of soul searching to do in the offseason, and it's the beginning of now a long offseason period for Baltimore. They're going to have to make some tough decisions, and we're going to see how this team looks at the beginning of next season because there will be some changes.
Jalen Carter refused to let Philadelphia Eagles' self-inflicted wounds end their season.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
It wasn't easy, and that's an understatement. That was maybe the most stressful yet fun playoff game that wasn't a Super Bowl I've ever watched as an Eagles fan. But regardless, the Eagles are headed to their 3rd NFC Championship game in 7 years, their 2nd NFC title in the last 3 years, a 28-22 win over the Los Angeles Rams. And this game, again, it was beautiful and torturous, all wrapped up in one. The snow looked incredible. The Eagles had so many storybook moments in this game, and yet it was one of the most frustrating, stressful games I've ever watched because the Eagles tried to shoot themselves in the foot and end their own season time after time after time in this game. They just could not put the Rams down. Every single play you feel like, there it is. That's the moment. This game's over. The Rams found a way back in it until the final drive. And it's all because of the reason, even with that being said, the Eagles are headed to the NFC title, a home game in Philly next week against Washington, is because of, there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason, number 98, Jalen Carter. He refused to let the Eagles end their own season. This was one of the most historic, dominating performances from a player I've ever seen in the playoffs. And you can say that twice about 2 Eagles in this football game because Saquon Barkley had a historic performance himself. 26 carries, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But I think the story of the game was Jalen Carter. I was a week early challenging Jalen, saying, I want to see, you've been dominant all year. Your efficiency numbers, elite. Like, you are the alpha of the Eagles defense. But I want to see one of those performances where you take over from start to finish, where you say, I am one of the best players. Not only I'm the best player on this defense, I'm the best player on this field. I am the best player at my position in the NFL, and I am a generational potential Hall of Fame talent. Like, that's what I wanted to see from Jalen Carter in the playoffs. Show me you're the next Fletcher Cox. Show me you're the next Aaron Donald. He absolutely did that today. 2 sacks, a forced fumble. I mean, genuinely, you can even combine quarterbacks in this conversation. Jalen Carter today had one of the most impressive playoff performances that I've ever seen. And again, those 2 huge plays that he made won you this game in the second half, where Jalen Hurts is injured. That knee looks super messed up. He takes a brutal sack in his own end zone for a Rams safety. The game is now, it's 16-15. It feels all but over. The Eagles season's about to end. Jalen Carter, like he's Falcon from Nintendo, punches the football out of Kyron Williams' hands, forces the fumble. Isaiah Rodgers picks it up, almost takes it to the house. Again, that completely changed the momentum of the game. It felt like the Eagles were done. They were dead. They looked dead in the water. Jalen Carter said no. That completely turned the game around. Then, after Saquon Barkley's second 60-plus yard touchdown of the game, you feel like it's over again. But no. Vic Fangio's soft coverage lets the Rams march down the field. They score. The Eagles have a quick 3-and-out, a terrible play call from Kellen Moore on second down where he dials up a passing play. Jalen takes another bad sack because he can't move. Here come the Rams. 2 missed extra points from Jake Elliott. Give LA an opportunity to go win the game with a little over 2 minutes to go. They march all the way down yet again to the Eagles inside the 20. Jalen Carter, a massive sack on third down, makes it 4th and long. Turnover the very next play. I mean, this was just unbelievable from Jalen Carter. And you shouldn't be surprised because he is one of the best players in the NFL. But this, like in year 2, to have this kind of legendary clutch performance in such a massive spot to give your team a home NFC championship was unbelievable. But it wasn't just him. This is why you draft players from the best college defense of all time. Nolan Smith with a huge strip sack of his own in the second half. Moro Ijoma, a huge sack. His first career sack in the second half comes in a massive moment. That defensive line took over when it mattered most. But it really was like Jalen Carter and Saquon Barkley. Those are the 2 heroes of this football game. It was, I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, you guys can hear my voice. I'm completely shot. Outside of Super Bowl 52 and Super Bowl 57, I don't know if there's a game that rivals this kind of stress watching this football team. And yet it was so beautiful. The game looked incredible. The snow's coming down. There's so many good things you can take from this. Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith refusing to let you die. A young defense that suffers injuries to Nakobe Dean last week. Quinyon Mitchell leaves the game with a shoulder injury in the first quarter. You're down to backups, and your quarterback gets hurt. Everything's going wrong. You are shooting yourself in the foot. Your kicker is missing. Your coaches are not on their A game, and yet you still overcome and win that game. Like Jalen Hurts shows off his toughness. He's basically on one leg. He makes a huge play on 4th and 4 in a big spot in the second half, converting the first down to A.J. Brown. Like this, you can feel so great about this team from this win, and yet you could feel very nervous at the same time because the only reason the Rams were in this, and props to Matt Stafford, Sean McVay, Jared Verse wrecked this football game. The Rams defensive line, they won this matchup against the Eagles offensive line. I thought the Rams in the trenches, everybody called them small and soft all week long, and Jared Verse was getting a lot of flack for going after Eagles fans, as he should have. But those guys rose to the occasion. Like the Rams were good. I want to give them credit. But even with that being said, the Eagles should have won by a lot more than 6 points. I mean, how many times in the first half Jalen Hurts takes 2 bad sacks on third down, taking them out of field goal range? Like there's points left on the board. 2 dropped interceptions by Darius Slay and Isaiah Rodgers. That one gets pulled away by Demarcus Robinson for a huge completion that puts the Rams in Eagles territory. Vic Fangio's soft coverage in the second half lets the Rams get back within 1 score after what felt like the Saquon Barkley game-sealing touchdown. Kellen Moore just going pass heavy in a blizzard with an injured quarterback and a running back who's having a generational performance. I mean, drops from A.J. Brown, which would have set up a play on the 1-yard line over the middle. I mean, just an uncharacteristic game from number 11. There were so many things that the Eagles did today to try to end their own season, and that can make you feel a little bit weary about next week against Washington, but you normally don't see them be that self-destructive. And that's why I think actually this game, you should take it as a plus, as a positive, that even with all of that happening and your quarterback's hurt and you're in a blizzard, you still found a way to win this game and get an NFC title game at the Link next week. Like, I think this game can help you win a championship in the end. Like, there is so many lessons you can take from this. Like, this is a game that unites your team and sparks something special. Like, I really do think you could tell when you're watching something historic, right? When you're watching something special, something that you're going to say, in 10, 15 years, we're going to be looking back at this game and saying, wow, I can't believe we watched that live. Like, this game looked special. And I've never had more. It's such a confusing game. I've never had more fun watching football like today, and yet I've never been more stressed. If you remove the 2 Super Bowls that I've watched with the Eagles as a coherent fan and analyst. I mean, it was just, I'm so glad it's over, but holy cow, what a finish. And the Eagles will host the Commanders next week for, like I said, their 3rd NFC title in the last 8 seasons, their 2nd home NFC title in 3 years. A win is a win in the playoffs, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, a win is a win in the playoffs, and the Eagles got a win today. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, this era of Eagles football, all they do is find a way to win football games. But the story of today, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Saquon Barkley, those 3 especially, they were the ones that found a way to win this football game.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of the most fun evenings this year was me and my wife getting a chance to go out. The excitement, the energy, it's unforgettable. It's unmistakable. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
We have been waiting 12 long years for another opportunity like the one Notre Dame has today.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
All right, let's get into it. I have spent the past week and a half thinking and talking about this game for practically every waking second, and guess what? I'm still not done. I did a solo preview last week, plus I had special guests on from the Notre Dame and the Ohio State side to get you ready for this game, but to make sure that I don't leave a single stone unturned, I wanted to make sure that I answer your final questions before the big game later tonight. So today, we're doing another mailbag, and we're only talking about the national championship. I got a couple questions about coaching moves in the transfer portal and other offseason stuff. We are saving that for another show because we have the next 7 months to talk about offseason. Let's savor the football while we can. And we got one more football game later tonight. So the first question, Mike Lucchini, do we think Jagasaw getting back involved in the line will be a net positive post-NAP injury? And second question, can Notre Dame recover if the start looks like the Penn State game? Let's talk about that offensive line. So Charles Jagasaw is going to start at left tackle. He apparently told Molly McGrath, she released that to the media. And yeah, Charles Jagasaw at left tackle is certainly intriguing. I should mention that I am taping this on Friday night because I'm leaving for Atlanta. So if we get some more news that Charles Jagasaw is not going to end up starting at left tackle and maybe plays right guard, I'm just telling you right now, I'm taping this Friday. So if any news happens between now and the day of the game, that's why I missed it. So let's just go under the assumption that Charles Jagasaw is telling the truth. He starts at left tackle and Rocco Spindler is going to give it a go. I think that there are some potential positives with Jagasaw playing left tackle. I think he can move a little bit better than Knapp, but I think Knapp is very comfortable. He's been playing all season long, and my biggest concern about Jagasaw is that we're not sure how he's going to hold up for a full game. Like, he did well against Penn State when he came in relief for Rocco Spindler, but it is a totally different ask to play all 60 minutes after he didn't play a single football game all year long. Like, it's great that he's back out there, but I don't really think he's in football shape. And if this game goes well into the fourth quarter and it's still in jeopardy, or if it goes into overtime, like, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about Jagasaw's endurance. But still, he's a great player. There's a reason why he was projected to be the starter before the season even started. And Mike Denbrock praised him and said that they were really excited about what he's capable of. And I thought his effort against Penn State was really strong. So I think that they're going to be okay at left tackle. Plus, Ohio State doesn't really have that much film on him. So I think that's good. But again, I'm worried about his endurance. And we'll see what happens at right guard. Like I said, I think Rocco Spindler is going to give it a go. We'll see how long he's able to hold up because he had to leave the Indiana game and he also had to leave the Penn State game. So I give him a ton of credit for trying to gut it out. But man, that is just, it's tough to do, especially if you can't plant on that foot while he deals with an ankle injury of his own. So if there's a situation where Spindler has to come out of the game, then what do you do? Do you move Jagasaw back to right guard where he played against Penn State? That seems like you're asking a lot of him. Or you put in Sam Pendleton, who actually started the season at left guard, but clearly things have been not right with him because they put in Jagasaw over Pendleton once Spindler went out in that Penn State game. So I'm not really sure if the coaching staff is very confident in Pendleton. It's just a really unfortunate situation to be going into the national championship, and you don't really know who's going to be playing on the offensive line. But Notre Dame has been dealing with injuries all year long. That's been like the story of the season, the adversity, and the fact that Notre Dame has been able to overcome it all. So I'm not really going to make excuses for Notre Dame in this one. I think the offensive line is going to be able to hold their own. Second question, though. Can Notre Dame recover if the start looks like the Penn State game? No, I don't think so. I don't think they can afford to go down 10-0 to start the game. Ohio State is just too good on defense to let Notre Dame back in it. I think Notre Dame has to start out hot. I'm not saying they need to go down the field and score a touchdown on their opening drive, although I would really enjoy that. But they need to make sure that they have their foot on the gas and then they are going blow for blow with Ohio State early on in the game because they need this to get to the fourth quarter, because I think that's where Notre Dame has their best chance to beat Ohio State and let that pressure, all that weight that Ryan Day and this team have been dealing with ever since that loss to Michigan, I think they'll really start to feel it in the fourth quarter if that game is still in the balance, and that's when Notre Dame can strike. But if Ohio State goes up early 14-0, and then Notre Dame has to scramble and try to pass the ball downfield, and Ohio State's just waiting for it, I don't really think that's a recipe for success for Notre Dame. So starting fast is absolutely critical in this game. All right, next question comes from @McHaleFC. Do you think one of the wide receivers will step up again like what Jaden Greathouse did versus Penn State? Well, they have to. If Notre Dame has any chance of winning this game, they're not going to get by if there's not some productive wide receiver out there. So I actually think Jordan Faison is going to have a big game. He wasn't as much of a factor in that Penn State game. Give a ton of credit to Jaden Greathouse. He came up huge. It wasn't just that 54-yard touchdown. It was the great contested catch on 3rd and 9, and also the other catch on 3rd down on Notre Dame's final offensive possession to set up Mitch Jeter for the game-winning field goal. I think he gained a ton of confidence when he made that catch right by the Penn State sideline, chirped him a little bit, and that sort of carried him throughout the rest of the game. That's just kind of how it works with wide receivers. If you get involved early, that confidence can help you out the rest of the way. So if Jordan Faison gets the ball early and often, like I think he will, because he's a great athlete and he can create some mismatches going up against Ohio State's linebackers and safeties, that's where I think he can excel. And I just have so much respect for this Ohio State defense that I think that Jordan Faison is kind of like a nice little piece for Denbrock, because, when Greathouse, if he's lining up on the outside, or we'll see if Bo Collins even plays in this game, or Chris Mitchell, when they're on the outside, it's going to be tough to get them the ball. But when you can motion guys around and create those mismatches, for example, that last drive Notre Dame had in the first half when Steve Angeli was in the game, they motioned Jordan Faison to the right. He had one-on-one man coverage with the safety, and he ran a slant route where he basically ran behind the wide receiver in front of him, basically used him as a shield, cut underneath him, wide open for a first down. It's little things like that you can do with Jordan Faison to create separation and get the chains moving. So I think he's going to have a big game, but I also think that this could be a big game for Eli Raridon. I bet most people thought I was going to say Mitchell Evans. No, I think Ohio State is going to be keying on the tight end Mitchell Evans because of what he did last year. That was Mitchell Evans' breakout game. He had that one amazing one-handed catch. Ohio State's all right, we know about him. We can't let him get hot. So when Notre Dame comes out in 12 personnel, I think Eli Raridon might be forgotten about, and he could sneak out and catch a big pass. They tried to hit him in the end zone in the Penn State game. He drew a pass interference penalty, so it worked out. But I think that teams kind of forget about number 9. He's become a really good blocker, especially now that Notre Dame hasn't been able to use Cooper Flanagan because he suffered that Achilles injury. So I think that the Ohio State defense might forget about Eli Raridon, and he's going to come up and make a few catches. Mitchell Evans has become the default X factor, or guy who's poised to have a breakout game. I'm going a little bit against the grain. I think Eli Raridon is going to have a few big catches. Not saying he's going to have 100 yards, but I think he's going to come up with some key catches, and I think Jordan Faison is going to be the wide receiver who really steps up in this game. Next one, @Scriber2323. What do you think about Notre Dame's chances of being able to contain Ohio State's receivers? Look, you're not going to shut them down. They're just too good. They're amazing, right? The fact that they have Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman phenom, one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen, and then Emeka Egbuka, a senior who's a stud, who torched Notre Dame last year for 7 catches and 96 yards. He's great. And then Carnell Tate is their third wide receiver. Carnell Tate would easily be wide receiver 1 if he was on Notre Dame right now. So even though Notre Dame's secondary has been terrific all season long, I have a ton of faith in them, they're not going to be able to shut these guys down because they are just too good. So I think Notre Dame is going to run man, and they're going to run some zone. I think there's been a little bit too much talk about Notre Dame running man coverage, and I know that Leonard Moore said that we're not going to, change what we do. Like, that's right. But Notre Dame isn't running man like 90% of the time. Just because they run it more than everyone else in the country doesn't mean they run it exclusively. If you look at the data, they only run it 55% of the time. So it's not going to be as much about what coverage they're in. It's going to be about what Will Howard thinks that they're in. They're going to probably try to disguise their coverage as pre-snap to try to confuse him and get him to make some mistakes because, as we know, Notre Dame really needs to win the turnover battle in this game. So I think they're going to throw out some exotic pre-snap stuff to try to confuse Will Howard. Yeah, sometimes they're going to run man, sometimes they're going to run zone. But if they look like they're in man and then they run zone, or they look like they're in zone and then they switch back to man, like that's the kind of stuff that could force Will Howard into making mistakes. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. So Notre Dame has a good chance to try to contain him. I mean, I thought they did a good job last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. only had 3 catches for 32 yards, but he did get hurt in that game, and Benjamin Morrison was covering him for most of that game. So different task for Leonard Moore going up against Jeremiah Smith, but I think he's up for it. So Notre Dame just has to try to contain them as much as possible and limit the big plays. Like Jeremiah Smith caught that little dump pass and went 70 yards to the house in the first drive of that Rose Bowl. Notre Dame can't let that happen. I don't think they will because their secondary tackles exceptionally well, but this is a very difficult task. I think that they're up for it, but we're going to have to see. Don't get shocked or surprised or bummed out when Ohio State's wide receivers make a big play. That is going to happen. It's probably going to happen more than once. It's going to be about limiting and making sure that those don't start to happen over and over again. If that happens, Notre Dame's defense is going to be in a good position to make some plays.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add a little bit of juice to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Ohio State's mission throughout the playoffs has been to leave no doubt. And that's exactly what needs to happen tonight.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The emotions are high, sometimes they're very low. And now we're right here. The Buckeyes are in the national championship game tonight. And one thing throughout the entire playoffs, Ryan Day has been preaching, leave no doubt. And that's don't leave it up to a call. Don't leave it up to a play. Leave no doubt. Let your play do the speaking, and you're going to win the game. And I think that same thing has to happen tonight, that the Buckeyes can't leave it up to a play. They can't leave it up to a call. They can't let somebody else dictate the outcome of the game. They must take that into their own hands, and they must leave no doubt during the Natty tonight.
Yeah, they must leave no doubt. They must have no doubt. That's going to be the key to the game is can the team that showed up against Oregon a few weeks ago do it again? Like, can Will Howard trust his arm against Texas? We didn't see that. I think we saw conservative. We saw too concerned, and rightfully so. Texas defensive backs are fantastic. We didn't take as many chances. We didn't try to force anything, but this is a game to where it's like if Jeremiah Smith has an inch, you got to force it. You got to trust what you would have done all season. If this Buckeye team can trust what they do all season and not have doubt, they'll be fine. And I think that's the key to the game. And as far as, like you said, Day is right about that. Don't let this get down to a targeting, rule like that took him out of 2019. Don't let it get out to a fumble call in the same game. All of these things, like, don't do it. And we've seen that so far. Jack Sawyer, the play, you know what I mean? The strip, the ball bounces, secure it. Don't get the touchdown, end the game right there. That's the things we need to say. That could have been a oh man, what if moment. We've had so many what if moments under this Ryan Day regime. Like, what if this and what if that? We have to put that all their head. Get it to where the bad call happens. Honestly, like when you're up 21. Like you did Oregon and like you did Tennessee. So it's I don't know. It's crazy. I like their mindset. They seem to believe
in their mindset. It's not just coach speak, but on the other side of it, Notre Dame believes in everything they're doing too. So this is a real mental battle in this game, a real psychological game, if you will.
Psychological game is a very good way to describe it because when you think about the national championship, you're going up against a team that is your caliber. They have earned the right to be here.
Yeah.
And this path for both teams is harder than any other path to get to the national championship game. And so the psychological thing is huge. While there's a physical part of it, both teams are battling injuries. The physical part is expected. But sometimes these types of games, the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, the national championship game in college football, sometimes these games are won or even lost because of the mental aspect of it. And I think Ohio State, they're able to find ways to bounce back after boneheaded decisions, or even Will Howard. I can't get away from it. I give Will Howard 2 bad throws a game. I just expect it. Unfortunately, the last game was an interception, but I give him 2 bad throws a game. He generally does not allow those things to get him off of his game or to keep him down. The one time it happened, I think he was physically not 100%, and that's why that game partially ended the way that it did. But for the most part, this team has been able to overcome mental hurdles all season long, offensively, defensively. You've even seen the kicker, Jaden Fielding, overcome some mental blocks that he's had and made some big kicks, I think against Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And that aspect is huge because if Ohio State was physically ready for battle, cool. But if they weren't mentally ready for battle, Jeff, I don't think you or I would be confident that they would win this game. But I think that mental aspect is a big reason why people like us believe Ohio State will win tonight.
Yeah, that's the thing. It would be disrespectful for me to question this team's, mental toughness and the way they bounce back, because this is what makes this game so unique. And this is why we love this first time ever, college football national championship. I've just watched this team play 3 games. I would be a complete dope to say like, oh, I don't know if they got what it takes to tough out a game when we just saw them, we saw them, again, we've said it a million times, recover from the Michigan loss, bounce back, play an SEC team, mash them, then play the best team in the country at that point, mash them, and then to play a very, very, very talented Texas team, overcome, everything, bad play, bad overall play by the quarterback, couple bad bounces, interception, all this, and have a goal line stand and win the game by 14. Like, it would be ridiculous for me to question, like, can this team, overcome adversity? Will they get rattled? Will they get shaken? Do they have the mental makeup? And even Ryan Day, I think we've talked about it already. Like, I think Chip Kelly helped and Knowles helped, but like, he's managed the game better. He hasn't panicked on the timeouts. He's not freaking out on the sideline over something that's already happened. He's able to move on and adjust and not let a bad play continue to haunt him, for the rest of the game. So like, I have zero worries about whether this team's mentally tough enough. And a lot of that comes from being, you got a lot of four-year guys. You got a lot of guys who have been through so much and heard everything. But what I like the most is, like, typically it's a one game. Like, if it's a regular season, the pressure on Ohio State because of being Ohio State. Here's the thing. We've already seen 3 games. Like, Notre Dame can try all they want. I don't care. They can point at the numbers on, the betting sites or whatever. Nobody is going to believe they're an underdog after they just won 3 playoff games to get here.
Not at all.
So the huge advantage that every single team that plays Ohio State usually has isn't there. And that's giant. It's really like, I've always said this, if things are even, Ohio State, always has a chance. So that's what I like most about this, is that they can't play the like, whoa, man, if anybody says nobody thinks we can do it in this game from either side, they're crazy. So that's what I like most, is like, this is really about, mental toughness, physical toughness, and, who really adjust. This is about adjustments. This is a game of adjustments.
Do you think Ryan Day is up to the challenge to adjust on the fly like he needs to tonight?
I do think he is, only because he's done it. He's been prepared for every game. Texas was a little iffy. That was a kind of a weird called game. So I guess when I really look back at that was probably the worst game of the 3, obviously, but still, like, I don't know. Some of the plays were there. Like, I look back at the Tate drop on the goal line. I'm like, perfect play call. I look back but then I also look at the screen pass, perfect play call.
Yeah.
So I think he's done pretty good, but the way the way that they played, the other two has just been amazing. And even when I go back to look at how they played Penn State and how they played Indiana, two other playoff teams, it wasn't the really bad coaching game was Nebraska and Michigan. Those were the two that like really sit on Ryan Day's shoulders this year. We're past that now, but most overall, the games have been like, you get a feel for what's working and keep at it. And Will Howard's been a big part of, being able to trust your quarterback helps.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of the most fun evenings this year was me and my wife getting a chance to go out. The excitement, the energy, it's unforgettable. It's unmistakable. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Kentucky basketball took it down to the wire against the Alabama Crimson Tide.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
102-97 win over the Alabama Crimson Tide, a game that Kentucky absolutely could have won. And yet here we are recapping a loss. Going to be breaking down this one for you, the positives, the negatives. I think that in this game, you kind of just got beat, and you could have won, and it is what it is. There's no officiating gimmick, although we will talk about that. There's no massive frustration. Obviously, there's some defensive issues we'll get to, but it's kind of just a loss to one of the better teams in the nation. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the show. If you're listening on podcast, you can subscribe there as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. I definitely did not just spend the last 35 minutes recording an episode only to finish the show and realize that my mic was muted the entire time. So we're going to do it again. We're going to back this one up. We're going to talk about this one all over again. Definitely not something I'm against right now. Of course, there are a lot of different interesting things that happened in this game. I think that the way that Kentucky played offensively was good enough to win, but a lot of what you do on the defensive end is going to win or lose you ball games. Mark Pope said it in the post-game press conference. Some of the things that Kentucky was fighting: fatigue, injury, frustration. I think that was a shot at the officials, which is probably the most you're going to get out of Mark Pope when it comes to officiating this season, unless it gets worse, which it absolutely can. I think that's clear. But yeah, Kentucky in this game didn't do enough down the stretch to win it. Again, 97 points on pretty efficient shooting, especially considering your opponent. You couldn't keep him off the foul line, and you couldn't stop Grant Nelson. We've continued to talk in these preview and recap episodes about matching up with the opposing team's physical forwards. And Kentucky, game in and game out, doesn't have a dude to do that. They do not have somebody at the 4 to guard the opposing 4. And look, the fact that Kentucky's even 3-2 right now in the SEC, after having played Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Alabama, it's impressive. It is impressive. This team was put together in about a month and a half, late last spring. These kids didn't even know each other this time last year. Most of them didn't. Most of them didn't know Mark Pope outside of Jax. That's it. And you've beaten Florida. You've beaten State. You've beaten A&M. That's 3 top 25 teams according to Ken Pom. You played 3 straight games against AP top 15 teams. It's hard to win and just keep winning, especially given the circumstances. This is a tough league with a lot of tough teams, and it's hard to win. And it's hard to beat a team like Alabama, who can beat you in so many different ways. It's interesting to me, for those of you that watch the show, and there were some of you in the comments saying some of the things that I was saying in the preview episode, which is like, this is a good Alabama team. This is like one of the best teams in the country, a team that can absolutely win the national championship. They have good guard play. They play well down low. Their defense has significantly improved. They play well in transition. They shoot the three. They've got a good coach. I mean, this is a very well-rounded squad. And yet there was a large section of Kentucky fans out there that were running headfirst into this one. And I understand the confidence, expecting to win. Kentucky was favored. This is Mark Pope's first loss in Rupp Arena where he was favored. And there are a lot of Kentucky fans just running headfirst into this one saying, Bama's overrated. They're not very good. We're going to blow them out. It's just like, do you understand kind of what we're going up against here? I mean, this is the exact same thing as the Florida game, except things didn't work your way for the final 5 minutes or so. Florida is one of the best teams in the nation, full stop. Alabama is one of the best teams in the nation, full stop. Congratulations. Your reward for playing all these teams is by going on the road to Vanderbilt, who is absolutely not a doormat. Very good team. And then you get to play on the road at Tennessee, who is also one of the best teams in the nation, probably better than Florida and Bama, probably, because of what they can do to you defensively. So, credit Alabama. It's a good team. Frankly, the two things that I think lost you this game were the inability to prevent Grant Nelson from driving to the rim and the 14 extra free throws that Alabama took. Which, well, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. For the most part, the free throws that Alabama earned were warranted. They went and drove to the basket over and over and over again. Kentucky does not have a player on their roster that can consistently defend personnel like Alabama has without fouling them or giving up a basket or both. Nelson, a 6'10", 6'11", transfer from North Dakota State, you can find him anywhere, gentlemen, outmuscled you in this game. 6'11", 230, drove to the rim, and scored with efficiency. On top of this and the free throw shooting, I don't think the three ball is necessarily what beat you today as far as the entire game goes. It's certainly what beat you in the final few minutes. But as far as the entirety of the game, you didn't, as Kentucky, you understand this is one of the best three-point shooting teams in America. Like, they make more than almost anybody. And yet you continued to, whenever they set screens to get their shooters open, you continued to go under? You realize that Mark Sears or Nelson or whoever it is, Holloway, Youngblood, Phylon, who had a couple big threes in the second half, you understand, they're going to pull. That's their whole philosophy, is they're going to shoot the ball. You realize you have to step out on that, right? And maybe your argument is, well, if you step out and overcommit, they're going to drive to the basket. You got to pick your poison here. You kind of have to. The 2 threes that Grant Nelson hit at the beginning of the game were crucial. Massive for this one. If you don't get those, this game's either won by Kentucky or it's going to OT.